from now. So I did muse over what to call this session, and I eventually settled on working and learning from Herman Halls, because that is really a reflection of what we're doing at the moment. And the subtitle really is, well, how to succeed at blended learning, which is what we're doing now. So the university is now using a blended learning model. You might have seen this. This is the model that we're using to describe what we're doing at the moment. And you can see it's this interplay between delivery, activity and engagement. Delivery being us teaching stuff, mostly in a student-paced environment. So there's lots more recordings than before. There's also a mix of live sessions, but there's a lot of student activity in there. There's then structured activities that you have to do. So that could be read a book, read a chapter, read this article, write this reflection. And then, of course, there's engagement. And that session's just like this one today. We're having a workshop. It's a live thing. We can talk, we can discuss, we can ask questions. You can disagree with me. You can come up with suggestions. We've got that opportunity for debate. And then, of course, all of these three things, delivery, activity and engagement, circle round and form community. And that's all lecturers, all students involved in running a module. I think we can add professional services in there, so people like me working from the library, the Students' Future team, everyone working together to help deliver the programme and bits of it. And so each week you'll have a mixture of these different things, some delivery, some activity and some engagement. And that's really based on your discipline. It does vary dramatically depending on what's happening in your taught area, but you can expect at least some of these bits throughout the week. So one of the really important things with studying and learning in this environment is getting organised. And I can honestly say I know what it is like. So when we went into the first lockdown in March, I myself was studying still. I was just finishing my doctorate off and working full time. So being organised is really, really important to not only make sure we get everything in, but we keep ourselves motivated. So higher education's always needed us to be really organised. It's nothing new about this way of learning, us being online, us being offline. Higher education's always needed people to be really self-motivated, self-managing, and set their own goals and their own expectations. We have to admit though, blended learning does take that further. So previously, in on-campus learning, the kind of traditional timetable, you might have had something that looked like this. I've got a mixture of lectures in here, some tutorials, a workshop, and then I've got a club, a society, drama society here. And so in your average week, you've got these anchors, you've got these real firm points that you structure the rest of your week by. So I know on a Monday at 10 o'clock, I've got my Shakespeare seminar. And that's what I've got every Monday. And so I organise around that. Similarly, I've got, these are made up modules, by the way. They probably don't exist, but you can see on Wednesday, I've got my Art is Everything tutorial at 10 a.m. So these are the things that I know are happening. And so I've got to fit everything else around them. Now, if we look at this in a blended learning format, in a way that we kind of reflects what we're doing at the moment, it actually looks like this. I might have, a live session. I might have an on-campus session. It might all be in teams, but those anchor points are much fewer. And instead, I've got this long list of other stuff that I need to do. And of course, if you are a postgrad, you're doing doctoral level study, it pretty much looks exclusively like that post-it note, other than the odd modern research module. The key thing is you see there's the same amount of work to do, except for a lot of it is our responsibility to do at some point in that week. And this is where our minds trick us, because we've got few of those anchor points, we've got few of those firm directives that we're sitting around for the rest of the week, fewer things through which we can organise the rest of our week. So actually, you've got to be responsible for your timetable. So while the university's shown me I've got something on Monday at 10 and something on Friday at 10, I myself have penned in those other things. And instead of it being, turn up to the lecture, instead it's watch those videos, post those questions on Teams, watch that lecture, take part in that discussion, email my supervisor. I've got to start taking responsibility for building my own timetable. And this has a great advantage because you can see you have the option to organise it however you want. So you can choose when you're working and when you're not working. But it also means if you do not do that, if you do not organise your schedule and you do not start to pen some of these things in, all of those things on that post-it note, they are not going to happen. And that's really problematic because you can very easily fall behind quite quickly. And some people might start missing that kind of structured week, but you can do it yourself. And that's one of the real key things that you need to do with blended learning. You can do this on a week-by-week basis, so you can move things around, or, and it does save some time, you can keep a standard structure. So every Monday I do this, every Tuesday I do this, every Wednesday I do this. So one thing that we can do when we're managing our times is actually do a little bit of math. And we can start with how many hours a week we've got. So we've got 7 days a week, 24 hours in a day. So we've got 168 hours to spend our time in a week. And, well, we have to sleep. As much as I sometimes try to get that number lower, it never does make me my mental well-being any well. I know I need a minimum of 6.5 hours sleep every single day. That's really important for me to do that. And if I don't have that, I'm not going to be operating at my maximum capacity. And that's a different number for other people. And even though I know I only need 6.5 hours, I've actually got to be in bed longer than that because I don't fall asleep like that. So being reflective over how much time we have is important. So this leaves us down to 112. We need to eat, we need to bath, we've got to look after ourselves, so that leaves us 91 hours. And as an undergraduate, you should be spending 35 to 40 hours a week doing study. And so that means that leaves you with 56 hours free for you to do other things in as well. The important message here, though, is around all of this, you should be dedicating some serious time to your studies, at a minimum those 35 hours, if not longer. And if you look at that timetable slide I had right at the very beginning, it wasn't that scheduled. I had 3 hours in my timetable, didn't I? So if I go back here and have a look at this, that's what my timetable looks like. So I've got 3 hours in, that's 32 hours to schedule. That's 32 other hours of study I should be doing in a week. So it's really important for us to still remember that even though we don't necessarily have that structure, we still have a responsibility for that self-directed study, and we need to be putting those things into our own personal timetable. But on the flip side, it also does give you 8 hours a day for doing other stuff, for not studying. And I know, particularly in a lockdown, that those 8 hours look very, very different to what they may have in a traditional scenario. And this isn't anything just to do with students and study. Everybody's going through this at the moment. We've got free time, and unfortunately that's stuck in our bedrooms, our dorm rooms, our homes. And while we've got to get that study time in, we've also got to get time away from it as well. And one of the issues that you can get with blended learning is you spend too much time staring at a screen. So in some of that time away from your studies, you should be trying to get some off-screen time just for your own well-being and to recharge yourself. Another thing that we've got to do when we look at that weekly timetable is be super realistic about how long good study takes. And I'm really, really bad at this myself. You know, I'll put in a block of time in which I'm going to do some writing, but I never put in long enough. And if we look at an essay doesn't just look like one big block of time, write the essay. This is actually what it really looks like. Well, we might do a bit of searching. So yes, that could be journal articles. It could be just literary critique. It depends on what our essay is about, but we've got to maybe do a bit of searching. We might be researching the context of the thing that we're looking at. And then we've got to do some reading. And particularly if you are doing something based on literature, there's going to be lots of reading. There'll be set text potentially. So maybe not so much of the searching, more of the reading. although you will likely need to find some literary critique as well. There's then writing a plan. And although a lot of people skip the step, writing a plan is a really useful way to structure your writing. It means that when you write paragraph 2, you have a general idea of what's coming in paragraph 10 and 11 and 12. And it helps with your cross-referencing, it helps with your flow, it helps with your structure. Then you might need to do a bit more searching and a bit more reading. And then you write that first ugly draft. And nobody likes their first draft of work. It's horrible a lot of the time. And we don't necessarily want to share it, but you know what, we get it done and it's written. But then we've got to do a bit more writing. And it's not really a second draft, it's the same document now. We all do everything in Word or Google Docs, and that document starts with scrappy bits of notes and evolves until it becomes that polished essay. But we do a bit more writing. Then we do that proofreading, we're checking through, finding those errors. Then a bit more editing again. You know, we might find an issue, we might have missed something, checked our learning outcomes, realised we didn't meet one of them. Then we check our references, just make sure we're going to get 100% of the marks in that area, or at least not lose any of them through making some mistakes. Then we submit it, and then we recover in however we may wish to recover after that. And the important thing is, writing an essay is actually quite an involved process. There's lots of things in there that we've got to do, and each of those things takes time. So being super realistic about how much time we need is important. And one thing we should be doing back on our planner is not just write essay, but each of these individual steps, you know, do some reading, write notes on my reading, write a plan, and starting to step that down a bit. And that's really good for us mentally as well, because an essay is a big thing. It's this big mental barrier to write. And actually, if we break it down into its constituent tasks, it never looks quite as bad as it might feel. And as I've said right at the beginning, when we looked at those, how many hours a week do we have? We also need some me time. We need some time away from our studies as well. And I know that won't necessarily look like the pictures that I have on the slide now, because there's a lot of restrictions around the pandemic. But we can talk to people on video calls, we can read for pleasure, we can go outside, exercise, walk, depending on whatever restrictions we are in at the time. There's always something we can do to recharge ourselves, and we've all got something that we like, so make sure we still do that alongside our studies is really important. So after looking at that, we can now revisit that timetable that I'd set out. And so this was the 2 sessions that I've been given, the seminar and the workshop, and then the bits that I added in there. So I'd added in the watching the videos, posting the questions, emailing my supervisor, watching the other lecture, posting in the discussion. And I can start to flesh out those other things, and I've started to colour code it now. So live sessions, they don't move. I've got my asynchronous activities, so those are in blue. Those are the things that I've been asked to do or I've got to do. And then all those yellow bits, those are studying. So reviewing my lecture notes, engaging in critical analysis of what my seminars are based on, reviewing notes again, creating mind map summaries, doing some more reading, creating some summary cards ahead of an exam, doing some more reading, taking some time for my own personal writing. So, you know, my piece of poetry for the week, I'm sat there writing that down. I'm beginning to break up all of that huge mass of stuff that I've got to do for my degree, and I'm slowly beginning to chunk it down into individual bits. But also, I have life, or I have a life, or at least I try to. And you'll see here, I can start to put those things in as well. So I'm taking lunch breaks. I've got time in to check in with family. I've got time to watch a bit of Netflix. And you'll see what I've got here is very much based on a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. But life doesn't work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. So of course, all of those blocks of time can actually be spread out in any which way I want. And you'll see all of those blocks of time are the same on this diagram, But I've decided to not do anything on a Wednesday and a Saturday. And instead, I'm doing stuff on a Sunday, a Monday, a Tuesday, a Thursday and a Friday. And that's how I have chosen to split my time up. I'm also working much later. I'm not just doing 9 to 5. I've got some things where I've got blocks of time on an evening. So it's giving me my Sunday morning off, my Thursday afternoon, all day Wednesday, all day Saturday. But the consequence of that is I'm working most of Monday. I'm doing stuff on Sunday evening. One thing that we need to be super self-aware of when we're scheduling this is knowing when we work better. And that is different for all of us. So when I was a 19, 20-year-old doing my second year of university, I was a night owl. I wrote the vast majority of my second year of my undergraduate degree between the hours of 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. That was my sweet spot. And I sat and I wrote, and everybody else in the house was asleep. There was no distractions, and that's just what I needed now. Now, for me, as a slightly older member of staff and having just completed my postgrad as well, working in the early hours of the morning would not work. I'm completely drained by that point from a hard day of work and having other stuff to do. There'd be no point me scheduling to do things in those time blocks. So instead, I'd be maybe starting my day at 6 a.m. and getting up early and doing stuff then, and immediately doing stuff after work. But I wouldn't be doing stuff after 10 o'clock. So a lot of the literature does say, avoid working late, or, you must always work during the day. Actually, it's much more individualized. We're all different. We all work different at different times. There is research that shows we are at our most alert when we first wake up. And so for some people, it's really useful to pen difficult things right at the beginning of the day. There's other people who just do not function until they're about 3 coffees or, Pepsis into the day or something like that. So be really realistic about when you work best and schedule your time to do that. One thing I find works very well is what I call consequential time management. All of these blocks in my diary, they cannot get deleted. This is stuff I have to do, right? There's no way I can not do any of it. But they are like movable blocks. So yes, we can use a paper diary, but you will find it can be a bit more effective sometimes digitally because it allows us to move. So you'll see here that on a Tuesday at 9 o'clock through to 12 o'clock, I'm going to watch those videos from the poetry lecture, take notes, and then I'm going to post the questions on Teams. However, I might be in a house with 3 other students, we're all in the same bubble, and someone says, hey, shall we have a movie morning? Get the popcorn out and watch a couple of movies. Now my diary means I have to say no, but actually I can be a bit flexible because I've got loads of other time. So what I would do is I would take this Tuesday block here and I would drag it and maybe drop it to 6 o'clock or maybe onto the next day. And the reason I call it consequential time management is that there are consequences to those decisions. So yeah, I can wake up on Tuesday and decide to hang out with my friends instead. But the consequence is those 2 blocks, those 2 things that I'd penciled in to do, now need to move somewhere else into my week. And that is absolutely fine. And we can be really flexible with ourselves using that approach. But sometimes we need to say no. So you can see here on my Sunday, I've planned from 4 o'clock till 8 o'clock. I'm sat there and I've got 5 hours of study. And I'm going to do some asynchronous activity and I'm going to do some studying. Now, if that is for a live seminar on Monday morning and someone says to me then, hey, do you want to go for a run with me? We'll keep our distance. I'd have to say, I'm really sorry, but no. I've got work that I have to do for tomorrow, but I could do it Monday evening. So we can make those difficult decisions sometimes around our flexibility our time, but we can only do that if we put those things into our diary, either paper or digital in the first place. And of course, it's much easier if we break it down. There'd be no point in my diary saying Monday, study 9 till 12, study 2 till 5, Tuesday, study 9 till 12, study. It just doesn't work like that. We've got to break these things up and make them more manageable. So, one thing you will find you're doing a lot more of is taking part in video lectures, or not necessarily taking part in them, but using them as a learning tool. Video lectures are awesome. This will be a video lecture. I'm recording it now. We can let other people watch it at a later time. But when we look at that in the context of a lecture, one thing that can happen is you don't get those really important reminders. So if I'm teaching on campus and I'm seeing my students every Tuesday at 10 o'clock, I know in week 3 to say, don't forget your essay is due week 5. In week 4, I know to say, don't forget your essay is due in week 5. I know in week 5 to say, don't forget to hand in this week. I can give those little reminders. However, most video content was recorded weeks in advance. And so those little reminders don't happen because the focus is just on the content, not necessarily that wider programme. And some lecturers may mention those deadlines and reminders in, but quite fairly, others won't. So it's even more important for us to also put any deadlines into our diaries and make sure that we keep them. And check them and double check them. And that is so, so, so important. I made a mistake in my diary today. I put something in for Wednesday last week. I put something in for Wednesday tomorrow, this week, and I checked and it was actually Wednesday last week, and I'm 6 days late instead of 1 day early. Mistakes do happen and they have consequences, so don't do what I did. Double and triple check anything, make sure those deadlines are in there. If you have any doubts, contact your lecturers just to make sure you know when everything is due. You do not want to make any mistakes and potentially lose some marks because of that. So let's look specifically at how we can make the most of online lectures and webinars. So first of all, and it might seem obvious, it's really important to participate. So if you're in a Teams meeting, ask questions, raise your hand, do stuff, take part. And it might seem like a really silly little thing, but if you're comfortable to do so and you are in an environment where you can, turn the video on. That's a really good way to help you keep encouraged. I know that when my webcam is switched on, as it is for you all now in the Teams meeting, I'm sat up and I am alert and I am engaged. If the webcam's off, well, you can lay back, you can slouch, you can drift away, you can look in different directions. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that. Some staff won't do it either. We've got to do what we are comfortable with. However, if you are comfortable and you're in an environment in which you can do so, turn that camera on. It lets us see our learning community. It lets our lecturers see us. As a teacher, it's so valuable to me. I find it so much easier to teach when I know there's a sea of faces out there, because I can see things. I can see people nodding, or I can see people looking confused, and I can adjust what I'm saying. I can say, oh, I've clearly not explained that right. I'll give you another example. So it really is nice to get that participation. But at the same time, I know some people feel really nervous and they don't want to share that, and that's okay too. But the one thing I would say, if you do feel comfortable, turn that camera on. It does help us connect. It helps us put those faces, build those connections again. And it encourages us to be much more alert than maybe slouching and lazing off a little bit, as the temptation can be. So connect our webcams, participate in the discussion, raise your hand and talk. And if polls or other activities, mentees come up, engage in them and do them. It's a really nice way for us to see that we're not talking into the void. There is people there, and it does make it a much better session for everybody. We should also prepare for the session. If there is reading that we should do, we must do it. If the slides are available ahead of time, we could flick through them just so that we're aware of what's coming up. If there's any questions that we might have, we should write them down so we know we can ask them in the session. Just as we would for a lecture, we need to be ready. And note taking, which I'll go into in a fair bit of detail later, we should be ready for that as well. It is so easy to fall out of good habits. You know, in my professional life at work, I walk into a meeting, so that could be meeting with Anne in the art cafe, or it could be me meeting my colleagues in one of the library rooms to plan a session. I walk in there with a notebook on my iPad and I sit down and I take notes. I do not have that action built into and programmed into me sitting at a computer. My default is not to sit in front of my computer with a notebook. It seems a little bit illogical. I've got something I can type on. Why would I? But actually, we're losing good habits. So whatever you do for a lecture, whether it's rock up with your laptop and type notes, or it's turning up with a notebook and handwriting, we should continue to do those things for sessions as well. So that means we should have the paper or the file open ready to type in to for these kind of sessions as well. And I also understand perfectly that that presents a problem for some people. If you type your notes on a laptop, but you are also using that laptop for Teams, you cannot do both at the same time necessarily. So it might require a little bit of investment for us in time afterwards to replicate that note process. And I should say Microsoft Teams does have an excellent integration with a number of other apps. So you could use OneNote to type your own personal notes as well, which works very well. One thing that we need to do as well is be patient and understanding if there is lag or disconnections. It happens. I was teaching a couple of months ago and I had a power cut. Like that. Electricity gone, internet gone, lights gone, everything. The one thing we can't do is then everybody immediately log off and be like, yay, session's over. Stay there for a few minutes at least. You know, don't give up on us for a good 10-15 minutes, just in case something's happened. In that case, my power came back on, my internet came back on, I was back in 5 minutes to a room with a lot less people. Maybe they were affected by the same power cut, or maybe they thought, yay, session's over. So if anything does like that happens, be patient, wait for us to get back if necessary, but hopefully we'll all be okay. And then absolutely, as I've hinted at before, we might be watching a video, but we cannot treat it like Netflix or YouTube. We've got to sit there and take notes. And that's just one of those things. Our brain is programmed. We go to a lecture, we're sat at a desk, there's a table in front of us, we take a notepad or a laptop and we type. We are psychologically programmed to do that. It's what we always have done, so we repeat that process. Unfortunately, when we sit and watch a video, even if it's an online class, it's still video-esque, albeit live streamed. We're programmed to sit back and watch. Our brain is more likely to grab a bag of Maltesers and sit back and enjoy itself than it is to want to sit and write notes. And we've got to fight against that. We've got to be like, no, this is still a class, this is still learning, I'm still responsible, I have to write notes. So don't treat it like Netflix, create notes. And of course, when you're completing those notes, if the live session's recorded, we can log into Panopto and we can watch things back if we need to. We can't rely on it, it might not be recorded, but if it is recorded, that is an option that's available and we can use. So if that's a live session, we're participating, we're active, we're engaged, we're taking notes, we're looking at the recording. What if it is a session that is just recorded, there's no live session? Well, as we've seen before in those initial slides, it still needs to go in our diary, it's a thing we have to do, we've got to be really strict with ourselves and make sure we put those things in. So first thing of all, choose when and where you are going to do that and put it in your diary or your calendar. Write it down, make it happen. It could be the first thing that you do on a Monday or the last thing you do on a Sunday, plan your week out, or you could have a very rigid schedule and you copy and paste that into every week. Either is absolutely fine, but the important thing is every video you need to watch, any activity you need to do, you need to schedule when you do it. Put it in the diary, never delete it. Move it if you can, and if you need to, but never delete it. just as we can with a lecture or a video lecture, we can actually give ourselves a head start by reading ahead, seeing any relevant slides ahead of time, and as we're watching, write down questions so we're still super engaged with what we're looking at. And of course, just because it's a recording, it doesn't mean that you cannot ask questions. We have Canvas, we have Teams. Your lecturers will make it clear to you how they are happy to receive communications. I should also put email. People forget we've got that, but there's email there as well. The important thing is each of your lecturers will make it clear how they want to be contacted. And they are happy to be contacted. You have questions, please reach out and ask them. Don't think, oh, it's a video, I've not got that option. You absolutely do. You can still contact people and ask those questions that you might have. And exactly as I said for those live classes, with a recording, we have to take notes. We cannot treat it like Netflix. And the advantage we have when it is a recording, we can actually take a better set of notes than a live session. In a live session, you've got a finite amount of time and it moves on at pace. With a recorded session, you can pause, you can write, you can hit play again, think a bit, pause, write some more. The one thing we must not do is use that as an opportunity to write everything our lecturer said. And when we move into note-taking techniques, you'll see why that's important. One thing we can do to help us when we are working through this, you can add timestamps. So if you do need to revisit anything, you can say, really important, this is 5 minutes in the video, so it makes it easier for you to refresh yourself if you need to. And of course, in our notes, we can embed links to those videos so we keep everything in one place. So on that note, it's a really good time for us to move into taking notes. Now, note-taking is super important in blended learning. Note-taking is important in all learning. It's one of the ways in which we take control of our learning. It's one of the ways in which we demonstrate responsibility for our learning. And it's one of the things that we have absolute control over, how we do it and when we do it. It is one of the absolute abject expressions of learning itself. The really important thing is we should not think of it as note-taking. Note creation is a much better phrase. Ultimately, the process is there to help you build your understanding of the subject or the thing you are looking at, the topic. And as you can see here, it is a process of creation, not copying. So my original source on the left looks very different to my notes on the right. Our notes should be a reflection of our understanding and our thinking. You've seen with Microsoft Teams at the beginning of the session, I can get it to turn audio into text. There is nothing inherently human or creative about turning audio to text. So if you sit in live sessions and in lectures and you do nothing but type what you hear word for word, you are doing what Siri could do, or Alexa, or Microsoft Teams, or any other virtual assistant. You are doing a very robotic process. What we have to do with our notes is do... I don't know that. Funnily enough, my Alexa's complaining because it has no idea what I've just asked it to do. But we've got to focus on what is inherently human and what we can do, and that's our thinking, our feelings, our connections between ideas and our connections between them and our reflections on them. So when we are creating notes, we need to decide, are we going to do that physically, pen and paper? Are we going to do it digitally? Or are we going to do a bit of both? Now, handwritten notes are actually incredibly effective, particularly with live sessions, because we cannot write as quick as people speak. So if you were sat there and writing down sentence for sentence what I'm saying, and I started talking really quickly, there's no way you'd be able to write as quick as I'm talking. Because that happens, nobody can handwrite as quick as people can speak unless you know shorthand. It forces us to summarise. It forces us to abbreviate. It forces us to listen to the 3 sentences our lecturer said and instead write 1. It forces us to be picky. What are the salient points? What's really important? What do I absolutely have to include? What is background? What is new and must be written? What is something I already understand? So handwritten notes force us actually to be much better in our learning. This is not to rubbish digital notes. The only problem with digital note taking is many of us can type as quick as people can speak. So because of that, and we don't always intentionally do it, if we are typing our notes, we are more likely to type what we hear as opposed to type what we're thinking. So we essentially transcribe our lectures and we don't actually put any of our own questions, reflections, understanding and connections in there. As such, we present the information in the order it was given to us rather than the order that makes sense to us. So with that caveat, when we take digital notes, we need to have that exact same focus on us using our words, summarising, condensing and being selective. But with our digital notes, we can include multimedia. I can put videos in there. I can put audio files. I've got an unlimited canvas to work with. With paper notes, we're limited by our A5 or A4 notebook, or maybe our A3 sheet of paper. But with digital, we can scroll and scroll and scroll and have an unlimited canvas. We can back our notes up, save them on multiple devices. We can include multimedia like photos and documents and keep everything in one place. More importantly, we can organically change our minds. We can start typing and then scroll back up and type some more in an earlier bit, then scroll down and type later. Quite often in conversation, your lecturer might be topic A, topic A, topic C, topic C, topic A, topic B, topic A, topic C, 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 D, A, D. And actually, in your writing, when you're digital, you can write A, B, 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 C, 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 C. You keep everything that's like together. Or you might put in an order that makes sense to you. D, D, A, D, A, D, A, B, B, C. However the order works for you. One thing I should add, you'll note that you, as a University of Hull student, have an Office 365 account. Office 365 is the platform we're in now. It's now called Microsoft 365. We're using Microsoft Teams. One of the apps alongside Word, PowerPoint, Excel and Outlook that you get to install on your own computer for free is OneNote. And OneNote is absolutely amazing. You'll see here I've just opened OneNote. I've opened one of my notebooks, association and conferences. I've got all these little tabs down the side, so different topics for different events I've attended. And you'll see you can handwrite notes, you can put in photographs, you can draw arrows and link things together. You can just handwrite your notes. You can type your notes or take screenshots and put them in as well. So you'll see there's a whole variety of different things I can put in here. I can search them. I can access them on my phone, on my tablet, on my laptop, or through the OneNote website. So it's a fantastic app for us to keep everything together. And we can even drag and drop files in. So if these were some handwritten notes on a lecture, I could drag the PowerPoint file and put it in here. So I've got everything in one place. So I'd really recommend checking out OneNote. So let's look at how we can take notes. Well, we've got annotations. So we print off the slides or that journal article or the book or novel, and we underline and we highlight important things. It is amazing for recording information, but it is not very active. So while it works really well just to record initial thoughts, it's not really good for our learning. It's more good for recording than it is for learning. So that brings us to linear notes. Now, linear notes are probably the way in which most people take notes. You start at the top of the page and you keep writing until you get to the bottom. And essentially, particularly when it's handwritten, we're forced to present information in the order we read it or we hear it, because we can't create extra paper. It is very straightforward, it's very easy, you don't have to practice it. Anybody can get a sheet of paper and take some notes. But it is a linear representation of information in an order that might not represent our understanding. So actually linear notes are very, very, very poor for recall and learning. We can make them somewhat better with a few images. So these can really encourage us to use visual areas of our memory as well to, we're using more brain power essentially. We're using association with our text and our visuals to help us memorize things. But it's really patterned notes that are for most people at least, the most effective, because they are not linear. They more represent the way we associate ideas. And there's lots of different patterns notes. So on the left hand side we have a example of something that's almost a mind map. It's not quite. And at the top right we've got a spider diagram. And it's a bit more organic and flexible. It can be done in any which way. The idea between pattern notes is that you are creating links and associations. Important things are in the middle. These are the big ideas. And then subtopics branch out from those ideas. And then from here, subtopics. And then from here, subtopics. For this to be a true mind map, it would have to all be like this. So words on the line. And actually, with a mind map, we should be focusing on 1 or 2 words per line. So it looks more like this than the whole thing over here. And that's a very specific technique. Mind mapping was invented by somebody, Tony Buzan, and the colours, the style, the sizes is very coded to an effective way of learning. But it can be more organic than this. There's also an option for something called a concept map. And with a concept map, you've got multiple central ideas. So you can have an idea over here, one over here, one over here. They branch out like this, but you can also draw links in between. So you could be looking at a text. You could have all the key themes that come out from that. And you can see where they interact. And it lets you map out a subject. I should say you can Google free mind mapping software, or you can handwrite these. They can be used for live lectures, but if you're doing that, you're much better using a digital piece of software. Because if you're sitting down and hand drawing it, it takes too much time really to do it during a lecture or a video. You're much better using software if you want to do it in real time. And it does require practice. Unlike this, grab a sheet of paper, write. If you want to do that, it does take a fair bit of time for you to get familiar and used to that method and find what works for you. The key thing here is we're making connections, we're drawing arrows, we're linking those ideas together, and we're presenting information in the order that works for us. This is one of the most effective structures for taking notes, and it's called the Cornell method of note taking. And you can see what we do with it is we divide our page up into 3. We have a cue column on the left hand side and a note taking area on the right hand side. So in the class or during the video, we would, as normal, write our notes in the biggest box on the right hand side. But on the left hand side, we'd put key words, key points, key questions, our thoughts, our reflections. I disagree with that. Or actually, I think the red dress means this. Or there are multiple interpretations of this. Or actually, this is a reference to this other novel by the same author. There's a bit of shadowing here. So essentially, we've got the bit on the right, which is us creating notes. But on the left, we're focused more on our thoughts about them, our connections, our ideas, our connections to prior learning. And we can use this for actions as well. So I use an exclamation mark for something that's important, a question mark for something I don't understand, and an @ symbol for something I need to look up. So it might be that I need to actually go check that particular sonnet to see if it is quoted correctly. Or it might be that it's important, my lecturer said this is going to be on the exam. Okay, exclamation mark there, I'll go and look at that later. Or it could be something I don't understand. I don't understand that word, I don't understand that concept. I'm going to have to do more reading. I might need to email the lecturer or look on Canvas for resources. But the key thing is, after that lecture, you follow your cue column. Important, learn it. Question, answer it. Look at that symbol, look it up. And that's the first pass of your notes. The second pass is about 2 days later. Go back, read through them, and fill in that summary area. A few bullet points, a short paragraph, a tiny mind map. The key thing is, at this point, you've got to think, okay, what are the key points here? And it's encouraging you to revisit those notes and condense them. We can do this for our reading as well. Very, very similar, except for we want a bigger column on the left-hand side. The one on the right-hand side is for us quoting, us copying and pasting, us putting down the ideas of the author. The bit on the left-hand side is our analysis, our thoughts, our reflections, our questions, our, I agree with this, I disagree with this, or this is interesting, this is interpreted in many ways. And then just as before, a couple of days later, we intentionally go back, read through our notes, and we condense them. On this note, if anybody is handwriting their notes, one thing that can help you is that you should, immediately after you've written them, just go through and check if you've done any crazy handwriting. So particularly if it's a live session, we've all been there at some point, and you're sat there and you're writing and it's all nice and neat, and then it goes like this. Now, if I correct that half an hour later at the end of the lecture, I know what this means, and I can go in and very, very carefully pencil in clearer letters above. If you don't do that, and you go back to those notes a month later, you'll look at that and think, I have no idea what I've written. So if you are a bit of a frantic writer, afterwards just go back and neaten it up. The very final technique I want to talk to you about is the flow method. And flow is based on learning and not recording. If you're genuinely interested in this technique, I advise you to Google it, look on YouTube. Scott Young propagated this. He's framed this particular way of taking notes, and he's been very effective with it. He completed the whole MIT computing course in a single year. That's a 4-year program in America. He did it in one. He's just recently travelled the world, spending 3 months in 4 different countries. So 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, to learn 4 languages by not speaking anything other than the language that he's doing at the moment. And that's all based around this idea of flow. So you'll see here it's very organic, and the focus is we put things in orders that make sense to us. So we don't have a page of notes for this book and a page of notes for this concept or theme, and one for this lecture, one for the next, one for the other seminar. We record things thematically or by topic or how we see them organised. And we focus on, words, shapes, lines, arrows. It's not just linear notes. We can write in any order. We focus on importance. So if we know it already, we don't write it down. That's already there. We focus about latching on new ideas and our own words, our own understanding. We don't copy, we don't paste, we don't write what we hear. It is our mental picture of the subject. We can add new information everywhere, so it doesn't have to be on a single set of notes. So I've got this for the lectures, this for the reading. It can be just a big mind map where I bring together my reading of the book, the critical analysis, the lecture on it, bringing all of that together and drawing those connections, and importantly drawing connections backwards to prior learning as well. And it is going to be inherently messy, but it's okay because it's a representation of your understanding and your neural network. One of the real key things, and it's probably the thing I'm going to have to finish on looking at the time, is revisiting your notes to strengthen your learning. And this here is a really useful idea to consider. It's the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. And it shows us that when we learn something, it's immediately fresh in our minds. It's right in our active working memory. We were actively using that information. But a few hours later, it drops off. And as the days and the weeks pass, it eventually goes to a point where we're remembering 5 or 10% of what we've just gone through. I'm sure you can agree this is not much at all. So if we do nothing, you'll see it plateaus down to virtually nothing. So what we need to do is revisit, re-engage, actively review, summarise, make more notes, revisit those Cornell summary areas and fill them in, make a mind map that summarises the last 3 lectures. We've got to do something. It goes back into our working active memory. We're using it at the moment. Yes, it goes off. Yes, it plateaus. But you'll see, actually on a second repeat, it's plateauing higher. Third, even higher. 4, even higher. So actively revisiting things at increasing spaces is called spaced repetition. And it's one of the primary modes, the primary forms of understanding at the moment around learning. There's loads of research that shows spaced repetition is a really useful way to learn. So in practice, this is what it might look like. Well, on week 1, I'm attending a lecture online. I take some notes using the Cornell method. And then after that, immediately afterwards, I just quickly go through and I correct any typos or handwriting, neaten it up a bit, but I don't really do much. Then a couple of days later, I explicitly find some time and I use that time to go in and fill those summaries, a paragraph in each of them or just a few key bullet points. Then the next week, I take special effort to create a mind map for not just that lecture, but a few lectures and other bits of reading on that topic. So it's a big mind map and bringing together lots of information. 2 lectures, a novel that I've read, and 3 or 4 pieces of critical analysis, and weaving all of those threads together. And then at the end of the month, I start to create some flashcards because I know I've got an exam in this area, so I'm picking out those salient points and I'm creating some flashcards to help me recall the important bits. And then the final little bit I've got here is just communicating like a pro, and that's just to reiterate some of the key points. Use Teams, learn how to use it. You can use it to message lecturers, message peers. You can have your own study groups. You can call each other on this. You can schedule regular study groups as a peer network. Hey, we've got this video we need to watch every week. You could watch it together in Teams and talk about it afterwards. And of course, do get involved in other things that the university is offering. So we have lots of activities available, many of them online, many of them at distance, many of them COVID safe. So please do them. Please have other things around your study, and that's really good for your well-being. And of course, I've said it before, I've said it many times, speak to each other, get those questions resolved, and speak to your peers. You probably have done that throughout your whole degree. Continue to do that even though you're based in very different circumstances. And of course, as much as time with our family and friends is really important, we also need to avoid distractions. And that is incredibly difficult, even more so than usual. We've got family and friends might be Skyping us, there's video games, social media, there's apps, there's a whole range of different stuff that's distracting us. Particularly in lockdowns and other COVID restrictions, when you're locked away, somehow, even though on paper there's more time than ever before to study, mentally it can be more difficult. And we do need to look after ourselves, but also be aware that those distractions are going to be there and we do need to overcome them. So always put into context social media, family connections, other entertainment, calls, hobbies, video games and stuff like that. You absolutely can still do all of these things, but it has to be in moderation. And it does really, go back to those timetables that we looked at the very beginning of the session. Put the fun things in as well as the study bits and make sure you get a balance of both of those. And of course, one thing you do need to be aware of and be really careful to avoid is procrastination. And of course, it just sometimes seems even more tempting in lockdowns because we're stuck inside, because sometimes our mood is quite low. It's even easier for us to find ways to occupy our time. So do take time to look after yourself. Give yourself breaks from study, but also do focus on it when you need to. And of course, one way that we can do that is turning off those distractions. So as much as we love our family, we love our phones, we love our technology, if we're in a study time, mute it, turn it off. We can always turn it straight back on as soon as we finish, but it's important for us to have those quiet mute times where we can step away and focus on our study. And you know what? It means we enjoy it even more when we do finally let ourselves turn those things back on. So, mental well-being is something that we really do need to balance alongside our studies. So take care of yourselves and seek additional resources that you'll find on the university website. We've got a whole course around mental well-being and study, and I really advise you take a look at that because it's got some excellent resources within it. So let's recap the most salient point at the beginning of this presentation: how we manage our time. When we're learning, we must, of course, keep ourselves focused. And this really is one of those real salient points. It's the thing that I covered at the beginning. It's the thing that I want to end on. Please make sure that you go through anything that you have to do, any videos that you must watch, and you very, very carefully plan your schedule to make sure you do everything that you need to do in that particular week. And that is of absolute vital importance to make sure you're successful with blended learning. I just want to point out that we do have additional resources on our website. So we've got this brand new remote learning guide which covers many of the things that this video is covered in more detail, or in a different format. So you might not like watching videos but you like reading. So to do that, I can go into online learning and look at learning from recordings or learning webinars or looking at this blended learning model. So we've got lots more stuff in here for you on this guide. You can get there from the Skills Team website, so www.hull.ac.uk/skills. Go to Skills Guides, where you'll get the full list of everything that we offer, which includes some cool stuff to do with Microsoft Office 365, our digital student guide, as well as, of course, the remote learning guide over here. And that's how you'd get to this particular page that I've just brought up. One of the really important things that we are pushing at the moment is good online behaviour and good online learning. So to do this, we've developed a manifesto for better online learning. I'll link that below the video for everybody as well. And this here is all of those real key points that you really need to be engaging with. Being authentic, using the full name that you identify with in discussions, not nicknames. Respecting diversity. So we've got people of loads of different nationalities, religions and cultures. So being respectful of that in our discussions and using our language very precisely. And we have difficult conversations. That's okay. And people will make mistakes. But when we do, we should apologise. Communicating clearly, full sentences, proper English, no text speak. That's really important. Thinking of our environment, so if we're in a busy environment, muting ourselves when we're not speaking so we're not disturbing other people. Being professional, dressing appropriately for our classes, and giving our classes our focus, so not looking at our phones throughout it. Actively participating in those classes. Being present in them. Taking part, answering questions, asking questions, doing the activities. Taking part in that debate, and even when it gets really tricky, being respectful, listening to other people, and focusing on evidence and counter arguments. Try not to make it unhealthy. Don't make personal comments. We can comment on each other's ideas, but don't get nasty about it. And on that idea of nastiness, we do have that collective responsibility. So if somebody says something not very nice, and you're in a study group and there's no lecturer there, you can say, "Oh, I don't agree with that. I think that's inappropriate." And if it does get bad, speak to your lecturer. Let us know about that. One student, one screen. So because you've got the ability to take part in polls and type questions, really, if possible, you should sit in front of your device, your laptop, your tablet, your mobile phone, and not share it with other people. If you do, You might not have access to your device, you've got a flatmate in the same bubble, you want to watch it with the same screen, just check with the lecturer, just let them know, ask that they're happy with that, and that you won't miss out on anything from doing that. And then, of course, very carefully, and finally, if you are sharing anything and you press that share button, make sure you're happy with what's on your screen. You know, do you have Facebook open, or your dating profile, or your personal email? Close anything like that before you hit that share button, because you do not want to accidentally share something that you don't want other people to see.